Welcome to the Explainer. Now, when most people hear the term Vedic astrology, right, they kind of immediately picture ancient mysticism, crystal balls, maybe some vague prophecies. But what if I told you the foundational texts of this whole system read way less like a magical spell book and actually a lot more like a super complex, algorithm-like data science manual? Yep. Today, we're going to explore how ancient scholars literally attempted to calculate the trajectory of human life using strict mathematical variables. It's wild. Okay, let's just dive right into this. The main source we're unpacking today is the Brihat Parasara Horus Sastra, which is attributed to the ancient sage Parasara. And look, this isn't just about gazing at the stars. This text is basically a comprehensive, nuts and bolts manual for computing the variables of a human life. It sets up the cosmos as this giant moving matrix where planets act as dynamic data points, and their influence, it can actually be measured, quantified, and calculated to astonishingly precise degrees. And you know what's really cool? The ancients were deeply invested in making all this complex data visually digestible. I mean, according to the text, even Lord Brahma wanted to visually systematize these complex planetary interactions. The whole goal was to take massive amounts of astronomical data, the angles, the intersections, the lines of sight, and map them onto a simple diagram. It's basically an ancient form of data visualization, designed to make the invisible, mathematical connections of the cosmos pop right out to the trained eye. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the ancient astrological algorithm. Then, evaluating planetary aspects. Third, calculating planetary strengths. Fourth, the states of planets. Fifth, predicting human longevity. And finally, number 6, the mathematics of destiny. All right, part 1, the ancient astrological algorithm. Let's kick things off by setting up the fundamental way planets actually operate in this system. Because in this algorithm, planets are never static. Like, never. They are highly active mathematical data points. In the Brihat Parasara Horus Sastra, planets don't just sit there in a chart. They interact. They essentially look at each other. This influential gaze is called drishti, or an aspect. And here's the kicker, it's not a simple on or off switch. No, this gaze is quantified mathematically, in exact fractions. A planet might cast a quarter of its influence, a half, 3/4, or its full energetic weight onto another point in the sky. Every single interaction is measured in precise proportions. Moving on to section 2, evaluating planetary aspects. So, how exactly do we measure the strength of these planetary gazes? Well, this is an abstract philosophy. It's literal, hard math, straight out of chapter 26 of the text. To find the exact value of a planet's gaze, what they call the drishtikona, the text gives us a strict step-by-step formula. Step 1, you deduct the longitude of the aspected planet from the planet doing the aspecting. Step 2, you convert that resulting sum entirely into degrees. And step 3, you just divide by 2. Literally, divide by 2. This gives you the precise mathematical angle of influence. It's a straight-up algorithmic calculation dictating exactly how much power one celestial body is projecting onto another. Crazy, right? Okay, section 3, calculating planetary strengths. So now that we know how planets look at each other, we have to figure out how strong they actually are, because a planet's power isn't fixed at all. It actually fluctuates wildly depending on exactly where it's placed within the structural matrix of the Kundali chart and the conceptual zodiac wheel. Think of a planet moving through these different houses and signs as a variable in a massive equation, constantly changing its value based on its precise real-time coordinates. Now, one major way this value fluctuates is through time, which is known as temporal strength. The text actually divides planets into nocturnal and diurnal categories. The Moon, Mars, and Saturn, they have nathabala, meaning they power up at night. On the flip side, the Sun, Jupiter, and Venus have anathabala, so they hit their peak strength during the day. But what's really fascinating here is the outlier, Mercury. According to the text, Mercury is this unique data point that just remains fully strong across the board, whether it's day or night. It's the ultimate constant. And beyond just time, planets also act like physical vectors. They gain what's called digbala, or directional strength, totally depending on their compass alignment in the chart. For example, Mercury and Jupiter hit their absolute maximum power in the east. The Sun and Mars completely dominate the south, Saturn is strongest in the west, and the Moon and Venus peak in the north. So it's this beautifully complex spatial grid where a planet's strength is completely reliant on its geometric orientation. Which brings us to section 4, the states of planets. Now, the ancient sages didn't just stop at strength and direction. Oh no, they introduced a whole other layer of variables. And it gets really interesting when the system starts assigning these emotional states, called avastas, based entirely on a planet's environment. There are 9 of these states. So if a planet is in a mathematically perfect position, it's deepta, or exalted, super happy. If it's in a friend's territory, it's pramudita, or delighted. But if it's lumped in with a negative variable, it becomes vikala, distressed. And if it gets too close to the sun's degrees, it becomes kopa, basically eclipsed and really angry. So the overall output of the planet totally shifts based on its environmental mood. And this actually brings up an incredibly intriguing scenario within the algorithm. We already know some planets are considered malefic, meaning they represent mathematically dangerous or difficult variables. But what happens to the output if one of these dangerous variables is in an environmental state of sleep? Well, Chapter 45 gives us a totally surprising answer. If a malefic, a quote-unquote bad planet, is located in the 5th or 7th house of the chart, but it happens to be a nidravasta, which literally translates to a sleeping state, the output completely flips. I'm serious. Instead of causing harm, this sleeping negative variable actually produces highly auspicious, super positive effects for the person. It's just a brilliant example of how layered and highly conditional this ancient programming logic truly is. All right, Section 5, Predicting Human Longevity. So you might be asking, why go to all the trouble of calculating all these aspects, strengths, and sleeping states? Well, we combine all these variables to compute the ultimate, absolutely most critical output in the entire system, the human lifespan. Chapter 43 outlines this highly structured categorization of lifespans. Based on the exact sums of all the planetary variables we just talked about, a life is slotted into specific mathematical brackets. A balarista or yogarista indicates a span of 8 to 20 years. A short life is mathematically capped at 32 years. Medium life stretches up to 64 years, and a long life is calculated to reach up to 120 years. So the algorithm literally categorizes the end date based purely on the initial data inputs at birth. But get this, there is an exception to these standard brackets, and it involves a massive number, 1,000 years. The text actually details that a supernatural longevity of 1,000 years can occur, but only under a highly specific, honestly almost impossible equation. To achieve this, you'd need beneficial planets perfectly placed in the angles of the chart, and all the malefic planets strictly confined to the 3rd, 6th, and 11th houses. It's the ultimate algorithmic edge case. Finally, Section 6, the mathematics of destiny. So once that general lifespan bracket is calculated, how does the system identify the precise endpoint? Like, how does the algorithm actually terminate? Well, the endpoint is triggered by what the text calls Maraka planets. These are specifically calculated death-inflicting variables. According to Chapter 44, these are primarily the lords of the 2nd and 12th houses in the chart. When the timeline naturally reaches the active periods of these specific Maraka planets, they execute the mathematical conclusion of the life equation. They are essentially the built-in stop commands of the astrological code. So the crucial point I want you to take away from this is, when you really look at the Brihat Hora Shastra, destiny is absolutely not presented as some random guess or a mystical vision. No, it is framed as the rigorously calculated sum of planetary strengths, those intersecting aspects we divided by 2 earlier, and the incredibly complex environmental states of being. It is a highly systematized, structured approach to understanding reality. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to consider. Based on the strict formulas, the conditional logic, and the precise matrices we've explored today, is Vedic astrology simply ancient mysticism? Or is it actually a beautiful, incredibly complex mathematical attempt by ancient scholars to decode the underlying variables of the universe? I'll let you chew on that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it gave you a whole new perspective on the data science of antiquity. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.